My adoptive parents waited 3 years to harvest my kidney for their real daughter, so I left them with an empty operating room instead. Hey Reddit, I don't usually post stuff like this, but a lot of people tell me I've had a pretty messed up ride growing up. I was in the foster system most of my life until I got adopted by a really wealthy family at 15. At first, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Big house, private school, everything I'd never had before. But things inside that mansion weren't as perfect as they looked. And the older I got, the more I realized something about me wasn't right to them. I, 20 male, grew up the kind of kid you don't really notice. Foster system kid. Passed around more times than I can even remember now. By the time I hit 15, I'd lived in 12 different houses. Some people were okay, most were just waiting for the check. You get used to sleeping light, never unpacking fully, and keeping your mouth shut because if you make noise, you're difficult, and difficult kids don't last in a home very long. Then, the Smiths showed up. The first time I met them, I didn't know what to think. They weren't like the usual people who walked in with nervous smiles and thrift store clothes. Mr. Smith had that slick, perfect look. Mrs. Smith looked like she stepped out of one of those home magazines. And then there was Lauren, their daughter. She was 24 at the time, way older than me, and carried herself like everyone was supposed to look at her. Perfect skin, perfect clothes. But she had this fragile way about her. Pale, like someone who'd been sick most of her life. They said they wanted me. Out of all the kids they could have picked, they picked me. At 15, I didn't question it too hard. You don't really have the luxury of asking why me when someone says they'll give you a house to live in. But even then, it felt strange. Families like that don't come into foster care looking for teenagers. Especially not ones like me who'd been bounced around too many times. Still, I went with them. What was I going to do? Say no? Their house was the kind of place you only see in movies. Walking in felt unreal. I was used to peeling paint and broken furniture. Suddenly, I was standing on marble floors with a staircase that split in two directions. A room with a lock, a bed that wasn't shared, and space where nobody could touch my stuff. They wasted no time showing me off. The first week, they gave me new clothes, enrolled me in a private school where the kids complained about stupid things. They bought me everything I mentioned. One time, in passing, I said I always wanted to learn guitar. A week later, an electric guitar showed up in my room with an amp and a teacher who charged more an hour than most people make in a shift. I remember plugging it in the first night and hitting a few strings. The sound filled the room in a way nothing ever had before. It was the first thing in my life that felt like mine. Not borrowed, not hand-me-down, not temporary. But underneath all of it, there were little things I couldn't ignore. The health stuff started right away. Within weeks, I was sitting in doctor's offices, more than I ever had in my entire life. They said it was just to make sure I was healthy, after all the chaos of foster care. Blood tests, full physicals, scans, questions about my medical history. I didn't push back, because honestly, free medical care felt like a gift compared to what I was used to. But it was weird, too regular, too organized. Then there were the comments. At first, they sounded like compliments. You're so strong for your age, or you've really got great health for someone with your background. Stuff like that. But after a while, it felt like they were keeping score. The food rules were another thing. No junk food in the house at all. Everything was organic this, gluten-free that. The fridge was stacked with stuff I'd never even heard of before. I thought, okay, rich people eat different. But it wasn't just that. Mrs. Smith would actually watch me when I ate. If I grabbed seconds, she'd smile tightly and remind me about portion sizes. If I ate late at night, she'd lecture me about metabolism. We want to keep you in perfect shape, she'd say, like I was some kind of project. I wanted to believe it was just me being paranoid. For the first time in my life, I had my own room, my own guitar, a family that smiled in pictures and told me I belonged. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I wasn't seeing. Like all of it, the mansion, the gifts, the private school, was setting up for something else. I didn't know what the catch was yet, but I'd been in the system long enough to know there's always a catch. That thought stuck with me even as I tried to settle into the Smiths world. On the surface, life was smooth. To everyone else, I looked like the luckiest foster kid alive. To me, it just felt like living inside someone else's movie set. At school, it was obvious I didn't fit in, but the Smith name carried weight. Teachers treated me like I was some charity success story, and classmates didn't mess with me too much because they all knew who my parents were now. They'd whisper stuff like, "That's the Smith kid. You know they adopted him," like I was some rare exhibit on display. I learned quickly to just nod and keep quiet. No point explaining what real problems looked like. The Smiths seemed to love showing me off. They'd take me to these social events, fundraisers, galas, neighborhood dinners. They'd introduce me with big smiles, saying things like, "This is our son, we're so proud of him." Strangers would gush about how inspiring it was that a wealthy family opened their home to a foster kid. They'd pat me on the shoulder, shake my hand, and tell me I was lucky. I'd smile for the cameras, but inside, it felt fake. They weren't showing me off because they cared. They were showing me off because it made them look good. Behind closed doors, it was different. The rules at home got stricter the longer I stayed. Family dinner wasn't optional. I had to be at the table every night, no excuses. If I was late, Mrs. Smith would act sweet in front of everyone but later pull me aside and say, "We expect commitment in this family." My schedule was monitored. School, practice, lessons, even how long I played guitar in my room. They framed it as structure, but it felt like surveillance. And then there was Lauren. She wasn't outright mean, but she was unsettling. Sometimes she'd sit across from me at dinner and just watch. Not in a "I hate you" way, but more like I was some science project she was studying. She'd ask questions that didn't sound normal for siblings. "Do you ever get sick? How's your energy after gym? Do you heal fast when you get hurt?" At first, I laughed it off, gave short answers. But she never stopped asking. Once she even said, "You're built perfectly. It's not fair." She caught herself, smiled, and changed the subject. But I remembered it. The Smiths' reactions whenever I got injured made everything even stranger. One time at school, I fell during basketball and scraped my knee. Just a regular scrape, nothing dramatic. The nurse cleaned it up, and I thought that was the end of it. But when I got home, Mrs. Smith saw the bandage and lost it. She didn't yell, but her face went pale, and she made me sit down immediately. Mr. Smith called the doctor that night, demanding an appointment for further evaluation. Lauren looked like she was about to cry. After that, they banned me from playing basketball. Same thing happened again when I fell off my bike near the neighborhood park. Just a fall, a bruise on my arm. By the time I limped home, Mrs. Smith was already waiting at the door. Someone must have called her. She practically dragged me inside, muttering, "Reckless, absolutely reckless." Mr. Smith ranted about liability, about how I couldn't be allowed to endanger myself like this. They took my bike away the same night. From then on, it became a pattern. Any scrape, bruise, or cut turned into a crisis. They'd swarm me, call doctors, argue about safety, and then ban me from whatever activity caused it. Little by little, they stripped away anything normal. No sports, no riding bikes, no climbing trees, not even roughhousing with kids at school. Lauren even once scolded me for carrying my guitar amp alone because it was too heavy and dangerous. It was suffocating. The way they reacted, it wasn't about concern. It wasn't the way normal parents worry when their kid gets hurt. It was more desperate, like they couldn't stand the idea of me being damaged in any way. Like my body wasn't just mine, it was something they had to preserve. I started paying closer attention after that. When they thought I wasn't listening, I'd overhear conversations about me. Not regular parenting stuff. Things like, "We have to make sure he's maintained," or "Everything has to be controlled until it's time." That word, maintained, stuck in my head. Who talks about their kid like that? I didn't say anything, though. I wasn't dumb. If I confronted them, they'd just cover it up. So I nodded, smiled, and kept playing the grateful son while I paid attention to everything. Mr. Smith had an office on the second floor. I noticed how he always kept the same drawer locked, even if he was just stepping out for a minute. Mrs. Smith had a habit of writing notes in her planner about appointments. She'd underline doctor visits with red ink like they were life or death. And Lauren? She'd linger near me when I tuned my guitar, asking more questions about my health, always circling back to the same topic. By the time I was 17, I'd gotten good at pretending. I went to school, smiled in pictures, obeyed their rules. But in my head, I kept track of everything. Every strange comment, every overreaction, every rule that tightened around me. They thought they had me fooled. But I wasn't just some kid happy to finally have a bed and 3 meals a day. I knew something was off. And whatever it was only getting closer. By the time my 18th birthday rolled around, the Smiths had gone into overdrive. It wasn't just a cake at home or a dinner with close family. They treated it like some milestone event for the whole world to see. The kitchen was filled with balloons, banners, and expensive catering trays. Mrs. Smith had a photographer snapping pictures of me, cutting into a 3-tier cake like I was some celebrity. Lauren gave me this awkward smile, handing me a box with cufflinks I'd never wear. Mr. Smith rolled out a brand new watch, sleek and heavy on my wrist, whispering, "A man should always look the part." I tried to enjoy it. I really did. 18 was supposed to feel like freedom. Finally out of the system. Finally in control. But instead of freedom, I felt the weight of their stares every time I laughed, every time I unwrapped another gift. Like they weren't celebrating me. They were waiting. That night, they took me out to dinner. I sat there in a pressed shirt they'd picked out for me, trying to keep up with their conversation about real estate deals and charity events, while the unease in my stomach grew heavier with every passing minute. Then it happened. Mrs. Smith set her glass down with this deliberate little clink and gave Lauren a look. It was subtle, but I caught it. My stomach tightened. Mr. Smith reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. "Now that you're 18, he said, his tone shifting from cheerful dad to businesslike, "it's time we discuss your purpose in this family." That word, purpose, hit me wrong immediately. I opened the folder and my heart dropped. Inside were medical records, blood test results, genetic compatibility charts, scans with my name across the top, dates going back 3 years, every appointment I'd been dragged to, every sample I'd given, all cataloged neatly like I was a case study. For a second, the room spun. I stared at those papers, then back at them. Mrs. Smith smiled like this was all normal. "Lauren's been struggling with her health for years. You know that. What you don't know is that her kidneys are failing. We chose you for a reason." Mr. Smith leaned forward, voice steady, like he was explaining a deal. "You're a perfect match. Strong, healthy, exactly what Lauren needs. With your donation, she'll have her life back." Lauren finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to be ready. I knew you were the answer." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat closed up. They kept talking like I wasn't even there. "You'll move into Lauren's side of the house after the surgery," Mrs. Smith explained, already outlining the future. "We'll have dietary and exercise regimens for you to follow. The doctors will be prepared. Everything has been arranged." Mr. Smith tapped the table with his finger. "We've invested in you, son. The schools, the clothes, the vacations. Everything you've had was leading to this. It's time to give back. You owe us that much." It wasn't just the words. It was the way they said them. Calm. Certain. Like this had been set in stone years ago, and they were just unveiling the plan to me now. Mrs. Smith reached across the table and patted my hand gently. "Think of everything we've given you. This is your chance to prove your place in this family. To finally belong." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table, run out the door, tell everyone in that fancy restaurant what they'd just said. But years in the system had taught me better. Never show what you're really thinking until you know it's safe. So I nodded, slowly, pretended I was overwhelmed but considering it. Let them think I was scared but willing to come around. Inside, though, my mind was racing. Every doctor visit, every compliment about my health, every feral reaction whenever I so much as scraped a knee. It all made sense now. They hadn't been protecting me. They'd been preserving me, keeping me in mint condition until I turned 18 and they could cash in their investment. The waiter came back with dessert menus, completely unaware that my life had just been torn open. I swallowed hard, forced a smile, and told myself one thing over and over. Don't let them see you break. Not here. Not yet. Because if they thought I was going to roll over and hand them my kidney, just because they fed me for 3 years, they were more delusional than I'd realized. After that dinner, I couldn't look at them the same way. They carried on like everything was normal. Family breakfasts, Lauren practicing her smile in the mirror, Mr. Smith reading the paper like he hadn't just told me I was a walking organ donor. They thought I was processing, maybe even leaning toward agreeing. In reality, I was watching closer than ever. I knew there had to be more to it. Nobody goes this far without leaving a trail. The mansion was big, but patterns repeated if you paid attention. Mr. Smith always locked his office, but he never bothered with the attic. Mrs. Smith stored boxes up there. Old decorations, seasonal clothes, random junk. Nobody checked it often. I figured if there were answers, that was the place to look. So one night, after they went to bed, I slipped upstairs. I opened box after box of photo albums, old receipts. Then I found a metal file box shoved behind a stack of suitcases. The handwriting on the tabs was Mrs. Smith's. She must have kept her own copies. Planner notes, old test printouts, things she didn't want cluttering her husband's locked office. The lock was cheap. A screwdriver from the garage popped it open. Inside were folders, each labeled with a kid's name. Adam, Sarah, Madison. My stomach dropped as I flipped them open. Each file was the same. Medical reports, test results, evaluations written in neat handwriting. Next to Adam's name, incompatible. Sarah's file, ran away before testing complete. Madison's, unsuitable temperament. I stared at those words until my hands shook. These weren't adoption records. They were reports, like someone was running experiments. I was just the next one in line, the only one who lasted long enough to hit 18. I shoved the papers back, heart pounding so loud I thought it might echo through the house. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a trap, designed from the ground up. The next morning, I played along, ate breakfast, nodded at Mrs. Smith's questions, pretended to study for a test. But my head was spinning. I needed someone to talk to, someone outside the house. That's when I thought of my girlfriend. We'd been together almost 2 years. She was the first person I let close, the first person I told about my foster care past. She always acted like she understood me, like she wanted to build a future with me. If anyone could help me figure this out, it was her. I waited until lunch and texted her to meet me. We met at the park, same spot we always used. She showed up smiling, kissing me on the cheek like everything was fine. I wanted to believe her smile. I wanted to believe that at least one thing in my life was real. But the Smiths' words from dinner echoed in my head. We've invested in you. Everything you've had was leading to this. So I tested her. I told her about the dinner, about the folder, about how they said I was meant to give Lauren a kidney. I watched her face carefully. Instead of shock, her expression barely flickered. Just a tight swallow, a forced frown. That's really heavy, she said, choosing each word like it was rehearsed. But maybe they just want the best for you, you know? That's when I knew. She should have been furious for me, scared for me. But instead, she was softening it, like she wanted me to accept it. My chest tightened. I didn't confront her, not right then. If she was part of it, I needed proof. Later that week, I found it. I'd gone by her apartment unannounced. She wasn't home, but months back she'd given me a spare key just in case. I let myself in, telling myself it wasn't snooping if I was only checking in. But deep down, I knew what I was really looking for. The truth. I found a printed wire transfer receipt on her desk. $50,000. The sender wasn't Mr. Smith directly. It came from a Smith family charitable foundation. The memo line called it a mentorship stipend. Next to it was a folder. Inside were email printouts between her and Mrs. Smith updates about me. My moods, my injuries, my reactions. Like she'd been submitting progress reports. One header line made my stomach twist. Ensure adherence/wellness tracking. Corporate words for what was basically spying on me. I sat on her bed holding those papers, every memory of our relationship collapsing in seconds. The late-night talks, the promises, the laughter, it had all been staged. She hadn't been my safe place. She'd been their spy. I left before she came back, slipping the papers into my jacket. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The guitar sat in the corner, the one gift that felt mine. But even that now looked different. They hadn't given it to me because they cared. They gave it to me to keep me quiet, to keep me happy enough not to run before 18. I knew I couldn't trust anyone under that roof, or outside it, apparently. The Smiths weren't just rich and controlling. They were delusional enough to believe they could raise a kid for spare parts. And my girlfriend wasn't mine at all. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt cold. If they thought I was going to give up, they were wrong. I'd survived 12 foster homes. I'd survived worse than this. And now I had proof, files from the attic, a wire receipt with her name on it, and the knowledge that everything they'd built was rotting underneath. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to use it. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in that house much longer. Every second I spent there was another second closer to them deciding it was time. They thought I was stalling, maybe even softening up to the idea. But I wasn't stalling. I was planning. The first step was misdirection. I started packing a small bag, but not the obvious way. I left it half-zipped under my bed, just enough sticking out that if Mrs. Smith came snooping, as she liked to do when she thought I wasn't home, she'd see it. Inside, I put decoy stuff, an old hoodie, a pair of socks, some notebooks. Nothing I'd actually need. The real stash I kept in my guitar case. The underneck pocket and zip compartment looked like they only held cables and picks, but inside I'd tucked cash, the copied papers from the attic, and a couple essentials I'd picked up quietly. I also left my phone where they could find it, on my desk, unlocked, with a few staged messages to my girlfriend about thinking it over and maybe I'll do it for them. If she reported back like I suspected, it would confirm their belief that I was close to agreeing. The night it all came to a head, I knew something was off the second I walked through the door. The house was too quiet. Normally, there was noise. Lauren on the phone, Mr. Smith pacing in his office, Mrs. Smith humming while she cooked. That night, silence. When I stepped into the kitchen, they were waiting. All three of them. Lauren's eyes were swollen, like she'd been crying, but the look she gave me wasn't sadness. It was hunger. Mrs. Smith had that tight smile she used when she wanted to seem calm, but wasn't. And Mr. Smith. He had the folder again. "Sit down," he ordered. I didn't move. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept my voice even. "What's this?" Mrs. Smith folded her hands. "We've given you time, darling. More than enough time. It's time to stop pretending you don't understand what's at stake here." Lauren's voice cracked as she said, "You don't get it. I've been waiting 3 years. I can't wait anymore." I swallowed hard and glanced toward the hallway. My guitar case was propped there. Mr. Smith stood, sliding the folder across the counter. "Sign the consent forms. Tonight. We've already arranged everything with a concierge clinic that fast-tracks approvals. They won't ask questions. They'll just book you in once you sign." That's when I heard footsteps behind me. My girlfriend stepped out of the shadows, holding her phone like she'd been recording. Her face was blank, like she was just doing her job. "You lied to me," I said, my voice low. She didn't answer. She just looked away. My chest burned, but I forced myself to keep my head. If I broke down, I was done. I shifted slightly, my eyes locking on the guitar case. It wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was the one real thing I had, and now it was going to be my way out. "Fine," I said slowly, pretending to give in. "I'll sign." Mrs. Smith's smile twitched, almost triumphant. She slid a pen across the counter, but instead of reaching for it, I lunged sideways and snatched the guitar case, yanking the strap over my shoulder. Then I swung the hard shell into the counter with a crack. Lauren screamed. Mr. Smith cursed. My girlfriend jumped back, clutching her phone to her chest. "Stay away from me," I snapped, gripping the case like a weapon. For a second, nobody moved. Then Mr. Smith charged. He wasn't fast enough. I swung again. The case edge slammed into his knee, the guitar inside rattling like it might break. He went down with a howl, clutching his leg. Mrs. Smith shrieked something I couldn't make out, but I was already running. I bolted for the back door, case still in my hands. I heard Lauren screaming behind me, heard my girlfriend yelling into her phone, probably calling them or someone else. My lungs burned as I tore across the lawn, vaulting over the fence into the alley. That's when I realized they'd prepared for this. I scrambled onto a dumpster, my sneakers slipping on the metal lid, and grabbed for the bottom rung of a fire escape. My arms screamed, but adrenaline pulled me up. Below, I heard Lauren's voice, furious and desperate. "He's climbing! Don't let him get away!" I hauled myself to the second-floor landing and tried the windows. Most were locked, but one cracked open. I shoved it wide enough to slide through, my case banging against the frame. Inside, I landed in a small, dark apartment. "Who the hell are you?" a man's voice barked. I spun. An older guy stood in the living room. He had a bat in his hands. I don't have time," I stammered. "They're after me. Please, just let me stay for a minute." He squinted, stepping closer. "Smith kid, right? I've seen you around. What's going on?" I hesitated. Then I blurted, "They want my kidney. They've been planning it for years. They won't let me go." His expression didn't change much, but I saw the recognition in his eyes. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, lowering the bat. "Get in here. Quick." I stumbled inside, gasping for breath. He shut the window and pulled the blinds. From outside, voices echoed in the alley, calling my name. The man, he introduced himself as Mike, handed me a glass of water. "I used to be a cop," he said bluntly. "You're not the first kid I've seen get chewed up by rich predators. But you might be the first who figured it out before it was too late." I sat on his couch, clutching the case, shaking so bad my teeth chattered. But for the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt like I wasn't alone. Mike grabbed a flash drive from his desk. "You've got proof?" I nodded, unzipped the case pocket, and slid out the copies. "Good," he said. "We'll make more. You're gonna need it." And sitting there in that tiny apartment, sweat still dripping down my back, I realized something. Escaping the Smiths wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Mike didn't let me sit around feeling sorry for myself. He got right to work making extra copies of the files I'd grabbed from the attic. "Rule number 1, he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "You never keep just one set of evidence. People with money can erase a lot of things, but not everything at once." He tucked another copy into his sock drawer, like he'd done this before. For the first time, I didn't feel like just a runaway kid. I felt like I actually had leverage. The next step was figuring out who I could trust. My girlfriend was out. The Smiths had bought her loyalty a long time ago. My classmates? Useless. Most of them barely knew me. But I had Peterson, my guitar teacher. He wasn't rich. didn't go to their country club, didn't owe them favors. He was the kind of guy who lived simply and kept his word. So Mike drove me to Peterson's apartment one night. The second he opened the door and saw me with a bag and a stranger, he asked, "What the hell happened?" I told him. Not the short version either. I unloaded everything. The endless health checkups, the birthday dinner, the kidney reveal, the attic files. His face tightened more with each detail. By the time I finished, he was pale. "Stay here," he said immediately. "I don't care what it costs me. You're not going back there." That night, while I tried to sleep on his couch, Peterson was already making calls. He had a friend who worked in family law, another who'd done social work. Within 2 days, I had a small circle of people looking at the files, verifying what I was saying, and offering advice. The Smiths, meanwhile, were busy rewriting reality. The first smear came through a neighborhood Facebook post. Missing child. Mental health crisis. My school photo plastered next to a description of me as confused, unstable, and off medication. People in the comments claimed they'd seen me acting erratic at the grocery store or the park. Some even said they hoped I'd get the help I need. It was surreal, watching them build a story about me like I was just some character they'd invented. But for every lie they told, I had something stronger. The truth. That's when Madison came into the picture. She was one of the names from the attic files. 22 now, living in another state. But when I reached out online, she replied almost immediately, "I knew they'd try again." We set up a video call. She described the same medical testing, the same rules around food and exercise. She'd escaped before things got too far, but she'd saved photos, documents, emails, notes she'd overheard. When she sent me scans, I felt like the ground had shifted. It wasn't just me anymore. This was a pattern. The Smiths must have felt the ground shifting too, because that's when they tried a different tactic. Peterson's lawyer sent a preservation of evidence letter to the Smiths' attorney, names, timestamps, and a demand to retain records. Not long after, their attorney wrote back. The reply wasn't denial, it was bait. A so-called settlement offer, college tuition, a car, even startup cash, all tied to a non-disclosure agreement. They wanted a statement saying I'd misunderstood their intentions. Peterson read it out loud to me at the kitchen table. But money couldn't erase what they'd done to the other kids. It couldn't stop them from doing it again if I stayed quiet. "Tell them no," I said. My voice shook, but I meant it. "Tell them no amount is enough." Peterson nodded slowly, like he was proud of me, and forwarded the rejection. The smear campaign ramped up after that, but cracks were showing. A neighbor caught Mrs. Smith on video in a grocery store, snapping at someone who asked about me. "Ungrateful little brat," she hissed, mask slipping. The video spread, and people started asking questions. Why would a worried mom talk like that if she was really searching for her son? Teachers began whispering about how strange it was that I'd had so many checkups. A few admitted the Smiths were too controlling about my health. Even a local journalist reached out, wanting to know more. I stayed quiet. That was strategy. Let them talk themselves into corners while I built a stronger case. Let their delusion expose them before I even opened my mouth. Late one night, I sat on Peterson's porch with my guitar across my lap. Mike sat beside me, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. "You're not just a foster kid anymore," he said. "You're someone with power. They don't see it yet, but they're finished." I strummed a few rough notes, the sound carrying into the night. For the first time, I believed him. The Smiths had spent 3 years preserving me like I was a resource to be tapped when it suited them. But they'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't going to play along. The catch I'd always been waiting for. I'd found it. And now I was going to use it to bring them down for good. Peterson's lawyer friend helped line it up. A community forum about foster care reform at the town center. It wasn't supposed to be about me, but word got around. The Smiths showed up, dressed to perfection, with their attorney in tow. Lauren wore white, like she was trying to look angelic, while her parents worked the room, shaking hands, whispering to anyone who would listen. They thought this was their stage to reclaim control. I walked in with Peterson, Mike, and Madison. For the first time since I'd escaped, I wasn't shaking. I was steady, focused. I'd brought my folder of files, the wire transfer copies, and Madison had her own stack of documents. She wasn't hiding anymore either. That morning, with Peterson's lawyer and Mike beside me, we'd already filed a full report and evidence packet with the State Attorney General's office and the Child Welfare Task Force. The forum wasn't our first move. It was our pressure play. When it was my turn to speak, the Smiths leaned forward like hunters waiting for prey. They expected me to stumble, to sound confused, maybe to lash out and look unstable. Instead, I laid everything out calmly. The medical records, The obsessive rules. The way they reacted whenever I got hurt. The birthday dinner. The consent forms. Then I held up the files from the attic. Adam, Sarah, Madison. Names that weren't supposed to resurface. This wasn't an adoption, I said, my voice carrying across the room. It was grooming. They weren't raising me to be their son. They were preserving me to be spare parts for Lauren. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lauren's face flushed red, her composure breaking. You were supposed to save me, she screamed, leaping from her chair. You're healthy and I'm not. And that's not fair. Her outburst only made my case stronger. People shifted uncomfortably, whispering. The Smith's attorney tried to calm her down, but she shoved him aside. We waited 3 years for you. You owe me my life. The room erupted. Some people shouted for security. Others yelled at the Smiths. Mrs. Smith jumped up, her pearls shaking against her neck, and hissed, He's lying. He's ungrateful. We gave him everything. Madison stood then, holding up her evidence. I lived with them before him. Everything he's saying is true. They did the same to me. They'll keep doing it if nobody stops them. That was the moment the Smiths lost the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones were up, recording every second. Mr. Smith tried to salvage it, standing and smoothing his jacket. We only ever wanted to help children. Any suggestion otherwise is slander. But then Mike stepped forward. His voice was rough, steady. I'm a retired cop. I've seen kids used and discarded by people with money and power. I've seen predators hide behind charity. What these kids are saying lines up too neatly to be coincidence. The Smiths froze. They hadn't expected someone like Mike, someone who couldn't be brushed off as a bitter foster kid. Mrs. Smith snapped. She lunged at Mr. Smith, clawing at him, screaming that he'd ruined everything. Security pulled her away as she shrieked obscenities, her polished image gone in seconds. Lauren collapsed into her chair, sobbing about wasted years and empty rooms. Mr. Smith just stood there, pale and silent, watching his entire life unravel. After that night, everything moved fast. Reporters ran the story. Photos of the files circulated online. Madison gave interviews. Teachers, neighbors, even doctors started coming forward with their own observations of how strange the Smiths had been with me. Mr. Smith's real estate firm cut ties with him. Deals collapsed overnight. Mrs. Smith disappeared from her charity boards. Lauren tried posting another emotional video, but the comments shredded her. Nobody bought her act anymore. Lawsuits piled up. The state revoked their foster parent certification and opened criminal and civil investigations. The agency that placed me with them went under review. As for me, I didn't get money or a new family handed to me. What I got was better. Freedom. I stayed with Peterson, picked up part-time work at a music shop, and kept playing my guitar. Mike checked in on me almost every day, treating me more like a son than the Smiths ever had. People who knew what it felt like to be treated like property and survive it. Months later, Peterson organized a small benefit concert at the community center. Nothing huge, maybe 50 people. I sat on stage with my guitar, looking out at the crowd. When I played, it wasn't for the Smiths. It wasn't for revenge. It was for her. For all of us who'd been used, discarded, or underestimated. For every kid who needed proof that survival could turn into something more. The Smiths had wanted my kidney. What they got instead was their reputation gutted, their empire collapsed, and their secrets dragged into the light. They'd planned for 3 years. I'd planned for survival. And in the end, survival won.